Now live. Welcome to Warrior Goddess Wednesday or Warrior Wednesday. And on today's episode, we're going to be looking at the birth and death chart of none other than the goddess herself, Miss Tina Turner. You may have noticed that I posted a bit of a tutorial. I'll be adding a bit of captions to that just so it's a little bit easier to follow along. To Proud Mary, one of Tina Turner's one of my favorite songs from Tina Turner. It was before her whole metamorphosis and reemergence in the 80s, but it's still a great song, right? So on today's episode, we are going to go over the birth and also the death chart, because as it stands right now, Pluto has moved back into Aquarius, so there's a lot of feelings of nostalgia right now. It may feel like things are back to the way they were just for a bit of time, but realistically what this means is before Pluto goes back into Aquarius for a while, it's an opportunity to tie up any loose ends as far as relationships go. And as we think of death and passing, we have to think of it, or rather I would like to think of it as less of a end or a finality, but rather a point of transition. And really, it's a matter of honoring the life that this person left behind and being able to take the gifts that have been given to us through those wonderful avatars and those experiences and those storylines, and use that to our advantage in the sense of taking those stories as empowerment. And ultimately, Miss Tina Turner, such a class act. You would never know that she was horrendously abused and had a really hard life, but managed to turn that all around. And so I'm hoping that for anyone who is going through a hard time right now, any kind of emotional trials and tribulations, that Tina Turner has gone through a lot, and out of all of it, she not only survived it, she thrived out of it. And even though she did pass quite recently, she did leave a legacy of a wonderful life. And she also has a wonderful perspective on the concept of death. And she has been quoted as saying that she was curious about the transition, about what that means. And I think she attributes that to her faith in Buddhism. But I'm jumping a little bit ahead. Let's get into the birth and death chart reading of Miss Tina Turner. Oops, you can't see that. There you go. So as you can see here, you've got the birth and death chart of Tina Turner. I'm just going to close. Hold on a second. Make sure I don't get hacked, right? All right, so Miss Tina Turner's birth and death, because we oftentimes look at the birth chart, which is the blueprint of the stars in the sky and all the luminaries and that map in terms of the archetypes and storylines available to us for us to be more in flow when you live out our existence. And there's also the time by which we leave. And when I did, for example, JFK's chart, his time of death was also shared by two other, I think, great figures like C.S. Lewis and Aldous Huxley. They all passed on the same day of the same year as JFK. So there is something to be said about times of transition, especially when we look at Tina Turner's birth chart as well, because we will use this as a learning moment, because this is class, warrior class, that is, right? So let's get into the program. So just so that we're all clear in terms of why I've renamed this salon to remove the psychedelic part of it, it's not to say that I don't use psychedelics in terms of my divination. I do. It's just a matter of, I feel like the term, the word has become quite trendy, and so I do, myself and Kevin do prefer entheogen and perhaps just a little bit more nuance when you're speaking about these things. And so as far as this salon goes, it's Neurolinguistic Astro from a perspective of the storylines that are available to us. And when you think about NLP, it's all about the internal stories that we tell ourselves, our belief systems, our pillars of thought that enable us to live out our experience. But sometimes we put up walls and put up pillars based on trauma or pain, or because we are trying to survive. And then later on, we don't realize why our behaviors are the way they are, but it's because we've done something previously to protect ourselves that is now no longer serving us, right? So it's a matter of, astrology comes into play here, where it can identify certain points where to look to have a ceremony, to have certain points in your life as to look to where to improve, or where you kind of would need to be guided towards doing some inner work. So in terms of the program today, as we go through Tina's chart, we're going to go into some stories, why I chose Tina Turner to do this reading with, as well as her birth chart reading, and then her death and transition reading as well. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with story time. So as far as story time with me, I have fond memories because I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s, and Tina was making her comeback in the 80s. My mom had the CD of The Best, where she's like in the black and white, I think, just her hair. And she used to play all those songs on blast. And I remember River Deep, Mountain High, that song, and Simply the Best, and What's Love Got to Do with It, which Kygo did a remix of. Tina Turner herself, Tina Turner is a stage name, right? Her real name is, hold on, I'll write this down. Anime Bullock. So she was born Anime Bullock in Brownsville, Tennessee. She is a Leo rising as well, which I think we can kind of tell. She's got that vivacious energy, but that's not all the fire that we have going on in her chart. Tina Turner's, I think this is a good opportunity to go into why what we call things matter, the names of things matter, because when Tina Turner was severely abused by her husband, Ike Turner, and that was such a crazy power dynamic, because he knew that she was such a talent and he controlled her completely, and he created the environment in such a way that she could never leave. And she was such a soft-hearted person that she stayed, and like all these excuses. And that movie, What's Love Got to Do with It, that Kevin we rewatched recently, Angela Bassett does an amazing job of, she's ripped AF in that. But going back to the name of things, Tina Turner is a name. It's a name that Ike Turner gave her. When she went through her divorce with Ike Turner, she kept 2 cars and her name. Everything else, the money, the cash, all of that, Ike got to keep that. She just needed her name because she knew what she could do with it. And even for that, he fought her for. And that's something to be said about how we live out our lives in this existence. The name that we're given to us, it is a persona. And throughout our life, we wear different personas. We do wear different masks based on the relationships that we have with people. But it is also important to have a true self-image, right? One that has integrity to it. And when you're in a position where your relationships are making you lose yourself, it's important to delve down deep and remember who it is you truly are and find that strength, because Tina Turner, after all that abuse, she did eventually leave, and she became even bigger on her own than she ever was with Ike Turner, right? Okay, so her birth chart. This is going to be a fantastic learning opportunity, especially for my Sagittarius friends, because I have a lot of friends who tell me like they're Sagittarius but don't necessarily know too much about the sign. But I'm going to get into some details. So Sagittarius and Geminis, we are still in Gemini season, the tail end of it. They are both mutable signs, and meaning that they're the distributors, the flexible signs of the zodiac. They also end up being opposing signs, so there's a relationship there. let's get into the beginning of Tina's chart. She is a Sagittarius, and as you can see here, there's a lot going on in that part of her chart. So she's got the Mercury and Venus, me too, in the same sign of Sagittarius. Her Sun and Mercury are conjunct. So if you have seen my presentation about Mercury, it's all about communication, the voice, your throat chakra, how you express. That's so tied to the Sun, and you can definitely feel that in how she's able to express. She's also talked about how chanting has helped her a lot in terms of healing and cultivating inner strength, and that is definitely felt here. These two luminaries oppose her moon, which is in Gemini, so I also have this placement. And the thing about Gemini is that it definitely, she's got that opposition then, right, between her sun and her moon. And so that means that your inner world and your outer world, there can be this push and pull. And you could definitely see that, like, you have your stage persona and then who you are at home. And so even when she was going through all of that abuse and all that pain, no one could tell because she still put on a brave face, put on your makeup and you're gonna go. Other things to note in her birth chart are that, here we go, Mars is in Pisces. So this is something that she shares with Marilyn Monroe. People say that Mars in Pisces is a challenging position just because Pisces rules the world of dreams, the unseen world, and Mars is very root chakra and very material world. And so it can feel almost stifled in the sign of Pisces, almost a feeling of frustration, like your dreams will never come true. However, just like with all challenging placements, if you can work through the lessons of that placement, you get a lot of treasure at the end. So that ended up happening. She had to work through a lot in order to get her freedom and get her self-autonomy and stand in her own power. But she did eventually do that, and her dreams became completely realized. The next thing I wanted to talk about was her fire grand trine. So she's got two of them, but I'm going to talk about one just to give you guys an idea of aspects in astrology. So all this stuff going on in Sagittarius, I'm sure I have a few Sagittariuses watching this right now. It doesn't mean that you're going to have the same life experience and life story as Miss Tina Turner because you have even this kind of placement. So for example, I have this, but just in a different sign. So the fact that Mercury, Venus, and the Sun are in the same sign is going to be different if you're in, let's say, Leo or Libra. Those come with it very different energies of those planets and those placements. But what I want to talk about is the grand fire trine that she has with her ascendant, her Sun, and Saturn. So these are very powerful positions, and they're in fire signs. So when you think of a trine, they share an elemental quality to them. So it's a grand fire trine. And grand trines in Astro are also known as talent trines, and just they express gifts that this individual should express in this lifetime. And when I say should express, I mean from a perspective of just like fruits that grow on a tree, if they go unpicked, then they just rot. So it's a matter of recognizing talent and then cultivating that talent so that you can express and share that talent. And definitely in the sign of Sagittarius, it's about distributing and sharing her gifts of what this fire gives her. So even in her voice, the way that she sounds, like it's just like rough. In the movie, Ike says that she sings really like almost like a dude, like a masculine kind of voice, but it's more of an energy where that's coming from, that deep kind of guttural energy. And before we go into her death chart, we're going to just take a quick look at Chiron, which is the key, which sits in Cancer. And this typically deals with, as I said, the wounds that need healing and where things need to be looked at in order to heal those wounds. And Cancer, we're approaching the sign of Cancer, and it's all about home life, ensuring that your home life ends up being a place of safety and security. also Cancer deals with things like the mother and relationships with the mother, so healing those relationships as well as cultivating a stable home. And I think Tina went through this whole journey of working and dealing with like relationships in her life where she was trying to find stability and all of that. She's willing to just work to provide for everyone constantly. But at the end of it, you need to ensure that you have a nice, steady, strong home for you to come home to. And she ended up moving to Switzerland with her partner. And Sagittariuses have been known to, they always end up moving. That's the thing, like they move away from their place of home. So Tennessee to Switzerland, that's a big move, but come a long way, baby. Okay, so Tina Turner, I didn't know exact time of death, but I don't think that we need to be super specific about that in order to get a read on the main messages that I wanted to get across today about going through a death chart reading, because really that soul's on to the next adventure. We are the ones who are left to alchemize our grief, alchemize any kind of loss that we're feeling now that we no longer have this avatar here for us to be inspired by, listen to her music, all of that beautiful stuff. So another thing to note in terms of Sagittarius and Gemini is that they're known as gates, and gates by which souls enter and exit this plane of existence. You can think of that. I'm trying to speak about this in a way that doesn't sound so like, but hey, sure, that's what it is. But regardless, if you think about the map of the cosmos, those are kind of points of transition. And so it is significant that Tina Turner passed on a cusp. She passed from the transition from Taurus into Gemini season, which is a point of change. And if we think of death itself as a point of change and transition, it makes a lot of sense. And it happened in her moon sign. And I think it's a matter of, she was very at peace with the fact that she was passing and moving on to the next stage of her existence, as well as there was a huge, I think I remember doing a reading around this time of year where just like this huge stellium, there's all this activity happening in Taurus and Aries in this first part of the chart. And ninth house is partnership. Sorry, we're not going to look at ascendant. So like anytime you have the time, that basically lines up the rest of the chart. We're not going to talk about that. So we'll ignore the house systems for now. We just want to look at the placements of the planets and any aspects that they're creating with each other at this point in time. So we have our fun friend Pluto over here, and Pluto is cusping Aquarius. It hadn't moved back into Capricorn just yet, and it was opposing the moon, opposing Mars, and Pluto brings with it change, all of that good stuff, burn it all down onto the next stage of transition. So the fact that Tina passed with her sun in her moon sign, kind of expressing a sort of accumulation of her journey of expressing herself as this performer and her talents and giving all of that to the world, to finally coming home and being emotionally true to herself, passing away at home, transiting at home around those who really loved her, and just being known as like a complete class act. Saturn is in Pisces right now, and as I was mentioning before, this is your dreams are really, really intense and really, really important right now. And so passing at this time, I see it as it was time, and likely that she's needed in other realms with her gifts, her double grand trine gifts, to express and share that music. Because the music, the logo, like the creative logos, when I wrote Dragon Warriors back in the day when I was 14, I wrote some people into existence. It's kind of funny, right? So what is that if you write someone who didn't exist and then they're in the book and now they appear? What is that, right? So was talking with a friend of mine about this, and it's not about you didn't make it up, just like I'm writing my book and I'm creating a world. They already exist in the ethereal creative realm. We get to pick and pull these down. We get to act as a conduit. We get to funnel all that energy through, and Tina Turner was definitely a conduit for that energy. Even Mad Max, we don't need another hero. So all of that energy is now out. She's created something new with that as an avatar, a new kind of thought form, right? And then now that serves as an inspiration. Her music lives on forever, immortally. So there's that as well, which is all about Sagittarius, that high thinking, high mind idea. And that way she will live forever. Okay, and she passed at the age of 83, and she definitely like pushed her body hard. She's spoken a bit about how she probably should have taken care of herself a little bit more, but hey, she's got all like that Leo energy, that like hustle energy. You also just need to take care of yourself. That's just as to all hustlers, even those with grand trines. So just some cosmic terms before we end off the presentation. Just going to move this up a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about the grand trine formation. Oh my gosh, I don't want to make that big. Here. Let's do this. Okay. So we have a grand trine formation, and she has not one, but two grand trine formations in the element of fire. And trine formations such as these also stand for talent trines, where there is a gift or blessing or talent that is required to be used in this incarnation, because other storylines also require you acting out your storyline. It's all synergistic. And in terms of the alchemy of astrology, the modalities referring to being cardinal, fixed, and mutable, and how I was saying, we break it up into quadrants. These modalities, as they work with each other, even within people, sometimes that's why in certain groups, certain bands, any kind of formation, you'll have people who are like idea generators, and then people who are gestations, and then people who are distributors. And not always at the same time for the same things. I say this as a project manager. It's about identifying what people are best at and like having people do that. And that's my Taurus talking. So we're going to get into more of that in a later presentation about the alchemy of Astro, just because there's also some really fun glyphs and research behind that as well. All right, so we have reached the end of this presentation. So for more magic, I am currently updating my website to include a birth chart calculator as well as a synastry chart calculator that you can use just so you can follow along with the readings in these presentations. I have also opened up Warrior Goddess Coaching, which is monthly coaching where you will get workouts to your inbox fresh every Monday, and it includes a whole lifting program and cardio program, as well as we're going to have Warrior Class Wednesdays, which is going to be a lesson based on things from supplementation, proper workout form, breathing, injury prevention, flexibility, how to lose fat, how to all of that kind of good stuff, just from being personal trainers and bringing that into just living out your life as a human being. Right? So stay tuned for that. Okay, so now I'm just going to close off the show. Thank you so much for joining me on this presentation of Tina Turner's birth and death chart on Neurolinguistic Astrology Live, Sacred Stories About the Stars. If you found my content interesting or informative at all, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. And you can always catch us on Monday at 8 p.m. I am working on a live stream on the weekend, Fridays or Saturdays. We'll see, which will be a more DJ and dance set. So stay tuned for that. I will drop a link in the description on how you can sign up for our newsletter to stay abreast of all our special events. And last but not least, this presentation is sponsored by Sacred Soma Alchemy and our Soma supplements, Formula 1, 2, and 3. I am working on more information about our superhero supplements, and if you want information on that, I will also drop a link to that in the description. I think that covered everything. All right, my friends, have a great evening or day or wherever you are in the cosmos. I hope you have a wonderful time, and until next time.